Hello, good afternoon everybody. How's everyone doing? Good? Awesome. So, hello guys, my name is Philip Kasumu. I work at Silicon Valley Bank. I head up our emerging manager practice. So I work with fund managers on fund 1, 2, or 3, sub 200 million, and I support them with everything from deal flow to banking and everything in between. I spend a lot of my time with LPs, so family offices, fund of funds. So, understanding the money behind the money. So really excited to be here today. So just by introduction, would you guys like to just briefly tell people who you are and what funds you're from?
I can start. Hi everyone, good to see so many beautiful black faces and others, of course. My name is Edwin Appiah and I am one of the founding partners of Cornerstone VC. Cornerstone VC is a people-first, diversity-focused venture capital fund. We've recently raised £20 million. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We just recently raised £20 million and we're proactively making investments into black and diverse founders. In addition, or prior to Cornerstone VC, I was also a co-founder of Cornerstone Partners, or Cornerstone Angel Syndicate, and we deployed £1.4 million into black and diverse founders. And I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you.
Awesome.
Lovely to see you all. Remus, I'm a partner at Local Globe. Pre-seed and seed fund. We're probably the oldest early stage fund in Europe. Our history goes back about 20 years to a father and son combination called Robin and Saul Klein. Fund has evolved, emerged over then, but our focus remains the same. We aim to be the first institutional capital that the most ambitious founders want to take within our core geography. Before the investor world, I spent 11 years building my own company called Finalta. In financial services, data and analytics. So I've all the scars, the grey hair or lack of hair that go with spending 11 years building a company. So a lot of that experience is obviously used when backing very early stage founders. So.
Yeah, that was a very modest intro in regards to Local Globe, by the way. You didn't mention that you are the #1 seed fund in Europe. That was a minor detail.
I guess it depends how you measure it.
Exits and unicorns. But anyway, so we want to talk about LPs. What are LPs? Who are LPs? And just by show of hands, does anybody in this room, does everybody know what an LP is? Just by show of hands. LPs, okay. So who are LPs and what was the fundraising like for the Local Globe's recent round?
Yeah, so LPs are the investors that sit behind our fund. So we've just closed Local Globe 12, which also gives you a sense of how long we've been around as an organization. It's a $200 million pre-seed and seed fund. And behind that, we have probably about 30 LPs. And they span different asset classes. So there are fund of funds, there are pension funds, there are family offices, there are high net worth individuals or families. So we've got 4 or 5 probably different groups of investors that we work with. Look, I won't lie, we're in a very fortunate position because we've been around for that long and historically have had quite a lot of success. We were massively oversubscribed and we have been for some time. So our challenge is more getting the right composition of LPs to sit around our fund. And so we've been on a journey for probably the last 5, 6, 7 years to make that LP base a little bit more representative of where we're investing, where we want to invest, but also who the beneficiaries of that investment are. So if we do our jobs really well, we like it that the beneficiaries of that are end people who generate or get financial improvements from our work. There's loads behind that, but yeah, generally that's kind of what our LP base would look like. We also have a load of individuals who are a lot of the founders that we've backed over the years who've built successful companies. We always welcome them with open arms. So we've got a lovely group of entrepreneurs who've been through the journey with us and they're now investing in our funds.
Yeah, I guess you're quite in a different position in the sense that you actually spend a lot of your time saying no to LPs as opposed to actually proactively fundraising, which is a different dynamic. But Edwin, I guess you guys at Cornerstone, being a Fund One, have a very different experience. Can you talk about your previous or your most recent fundraising experience for the latest fund?
I think I have to start off by saying that the journey was completely treacherous. Just think about it. It was following COVID, a very difficult economic backdrop. Me telling my wife that I wanted to give up my well-paid private banker job at Coutts in the city to start a fundraising journey over an 18-month period, relying on savings, minimal savings that I had in the bank account to try and get this vehicle off the ground. It was difficult. I mean, it was really difficult. But we persevered, and we were able to get in place a really, I mean, just think of LPs or limited partners as investors on your cap table, so for the founders in the room. So we see our LPs as investors or members that are sitting on our cap table, and we've got great collaborations, great partnerships with them. And I'm so pleased to say that we have HG Capital, we have BGF, and we also have Atomico that sit on our cap table. And they're very open, and they're very happy to be shared in terms of their names, because they want to be known to be backing diverse emerging managers, and they also want to be known and to be associated with supporting black and diverse beneficiaries. So yeah, the journey was difficult, but yeah, we thank God I'm here.
That's great. And I guess in terms of the profile, so you just mentioned a few of the funds that were involved in the fund, which is great, but let's talk about family offices, for example. You know, they play a big part in the ecosystem in terms of backing funds. What's the profile, or can you give an example of a profile of a family office you kind of met, or who got involved in the fund or didn't get involved in the fund, and what, you know, their background was and where they got their wealth from?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've contacted in the region of a couple of hundred of LPs, family offices, high net worths. Because of my previous job, I also had a great link to a number of family offices and high net worth individuals. In terms of the type of profiles, high net worth or family offices, they tend to have a lot of their money invested in the capital market, so, you know, stocks and shares, for example. And they, in order to diversify their portfolio, they look at alternative assets, whether it be property or otherwise. So when they look at venture capital, they see that as a more attractive proposition, a proposition that has, of course, its element of risk, but has massive potential upside. So in order to diversify the portfolio, in order to maybe improve the potential returns of their portfolio, they look at venture capital as a potential strategy. And so the types of family offices that we've spoken to, there were family offices based in Switzerland, family offices based in Dubai, and primarily in the Middle East. And you know, the makeup of them, as I say, would normally have a background in wealth management, or they would have some financial services experience, and they may have made some investments either as an angel or may have exited businesses in the past themselves. So that's the typical makeup of what the family offices tend to look like, or the family offices that I have seen. And the real reasons around why they wanted to get involved and back a vehicle like us is because they wanted to see if there was, you know, something that we could find or we could originate or identify in terms of businesses that they couldn't see elsewhere.
Same for you, Roy.
Actually, yeah, family offices are pretty broad in structure as well. You have like the very, very old generational wealth, whether it's like the founders of Rolex. They have a very active family office. They actually do quite amazing things with that capital as well. And then you have the much younger ones, the really successful tech founders who've had big exits and are, you know, very much involved in the startup tech ecosystem, and they're very keen to play their role and contribute by investing in funds. So it's a very mixed group, and yeah, often I think of our LP mix, on the subject of, I know we're going to come on to like diversity and how we invest our capital. They often have the strongest interest in who we're investing in, whether that's gender diversity, whether it's ethnic diversity. So probably of the LP universe, I'd say that it's probably the family offices that are more tuned into some of those issues. And if you go to the other end of the spectrum, the fund of funds, who are obviously intermediaries between other large sources of capital, they're probably less focused on that issue, at least at the moment. So
when it comes to diversity in tech, we all know the numbers. Less than, I think, 2 or 3% of founders get funded. What role do you think LPs could play in changing that narrative? And could they potentially change one? I mean, if we think about the new regulations around green reporting, right, which is still kind of like a wishy-washy area, very hard to, report on. How could that inform how GPs think about investing in black founders or diverse founders?
Yeah, so I think it's beginning to change, and I think if I look at our experience, I think we wouldn't exist if it hadn't started to change. I can name a couple of programs that have come out recently where they have a diversity focus around the emerging manager, and also a diversity focus around the founders that those emerging managers also back. So, for example, Amazon Catalytic Capital Program just recently announced they have about $150 million put aside to invest into black and diverse emerging managers. They are currently looking, or have made a couple of commitments into funds in the US. I think they're also going to start looking further afield into Europe and potentially into the UK. There's also Exponents and collaboration with Investcorp. And I think if I recall, maybe a couple of years ago, 2019, I think, they had a 200 million, 300 million program backing, again, diverse managers. So it's definitely beginning to change. And I think more and more, because of the research that you mentioned, because the evidence is out there, and that evidence has, of course, been validated by empirical data, I know that more managers will increasingly look to back diverse founders, diverse managers, which will, of course, lead to capital flows going into diverse founders as well. And yeah, I think when I think about the LPs that we have spoken to, it's definitely been a consideration for them that we as a fund improved or increased the level of capital that goes into diverse founders. And I think you're right. I think similar to green reporting, I think more needs to be done, or more evidence or more data needs to be captured. So, for example, Companies House, when you're registering your company, I don't see why at this stage in 2022 we're not at a point where we're updating our diversity data when we're registering our companies. We update our nationality, we update our age, we update our gender. Why can't we also update our diversity? So I think if we could maybe encourage those bodies, other initiatives to request for or demand that data, I think that data can be shared widely, and then that data can be used for a plethora of different reasons to help more founders from diverse backgrounds to be backed.
Good question. So I think it's probably worth, if you don't mind, just a second, to address the issue that you mentioned, you have to look at the full chain. And it starts with founders. In fact, it starts with the people that founders hire, because that's your future talent pool of entrepreneurs. It's the founders. It's the VCs that back the founders. It's then the LPs that support the VCs, and then it's the beneficiaries of that success or otherwise. So for the 2 or 3% stat to change, everything has to change. The reality is, most of the change so far has happened at this side. And, change is slow, but I think certainly from our view of the world, we definitely see progress. I don't think anyone expects overnight change or transformation. Everyone recognizes this is a decade or decades-long journey. But I think we're really seeing positive signs there. And if I think of the founders that we're backing now, really early stage, the way they're thinking about their team construction, and the importance of diversity at the very beginning, that was very rare 3 years ago. It's now the majority. So, I think the positive signs there. I think we have to be honest on the LP side. That's probably the
last thing on their mind.
No, it's not last thing on their mind. I mean, they're definitely changing their tune, but these are big asset managers. They don't suddenly change on anything. So, I think you're right. I mean, clearly, if you on climate, on emissions, that's now quite normal. When they're investing in us or others, they'll be wanting to understand what we do. They'll want to diligence that.
Yeah.
There is nothing done on race at the moment. The more progressive ones will ask questions, and they'll really be focusing on our team and understanding the diversity of our investment team. So there's two ways of looking at it. One is it's a bit depressing. The flip side is it's just the change is a little bit slower to come, but it is coming. And ultimately, if you follow the money, this is really what will change the system. So it is slow, and it will take time, but there are definitely signs that it's changing. But I think we also have to be honest at the moment. It's, when we finished our due diligence for our fundraise, out of the 30, maybe 2 or 3. I mean, there's more on gender. There's some proper thinking around gender diversity. On ethnic diversity, still very early. But I also see the positive signs there as well.
And I guess, do you think the issue of the lack of founder diversity is simply down to the GPs? Or, should we put some onus on the LPs as well in regards to that? So, where do you think the issues are lying? Because we still aren't seeing as many black founders get to seed or Series A, and I think those numbers have been quite flat for the last few years. So what are your thoughts around putting the onus on the GPs, actually?
Look, I founded an organization that I wish didn't have to exist, but the reason why it exists is because, as you've mentioned, Philip, the lack of capital going into the hands of black and diverse founders is shameful, right? It has to change. And I think the only way at this moment in time, and as you say, Remus, I think I agree with you, it's going to be progressive change. It's not going to happen overnight. But the way in which we can address it today is by giving more capital to those who can bring up and back founders that look like them. The reason why there's so many issues at this moment in time is because the collective, the group of people who are investing and backing founders all come from the same networks. So we recently produced a research report called Access to Venture Capital. And we found that social capital, or the lack thereof of social capital, was one of the main determining factors around why black and diverse founders don't raise any capital. And that's because the funding managers in the GPs tend to be white males. Sorry, Remus, but
Completely true.
it's not anecdotal anymore. It's factual, and the evidence is there. So if there's, I think it's difficult to say that it's only the GP or it's only the LP need to address this. I think it's a combination of both. I think LPs need to be very intentional about where their money goes and how much of that money will flow into the hands of emerging diverse managers. And GPs also have to be as intentional about making sure that when they're making investments, that first of all, their investment team is reflective of the community that's out there, and the founders that they back is also reflective of the community that's out there. So yeah, hopefully that helps to address that question.
Remus, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think just in terms of the dynamics, I think it's important to understand that for all of the big brand name VC firms that you would have heard of, and I don't want to use the word power, but they have been so successful. The idea that any LP will call the shots, it just doesn't happen. If you've got a queue of X number of other sources of capital who are desperate to get into a Sequoia fund or into an Andreessen fund, being in a position where you say, look, we're only going to invest if you do A, B, C, D, or E, that's not going to happen. So I don't think it's a control thing. So I believe at the moment the responsibility is absolutely with us as the GPs. So it's our responsibility to try and change the makeup of our capital and where we invest, but it's also really our responsibility to have those conversations with our LPs. And it's really important for us when we look at our cap table, we are really keen to understand the LPs where the beneficiaries is the black community. It's really hard to do. So you've got the well-known US universities that have always supported black students. So they're kind of known and they have endowment funds and that's kind of well known. So we've just commissioned a piece of research which is going to try and understand of all the sources of LP capital, where are the ultimate beneficiaries, largely black or underrepresented communities. So we've started doing that now. I mean, we'd love to, this is going to be a collaborative effort because we've actually spent quite a lot of time ourselves doing this and we really struggled. We're saying like we'd like to change our LP base to have an allocation that looks like this and we just couldn't find ultimate beneficiaries that represent the black community. So that is changing, but I think all of these things need to happen at the same time.
And I guess to that point, then, do you believe then diverse funds are the answer in the interim right now? Right. Edwin mentioned earlier he started an organization which he wished didn't have to exist. Is that the answer? A black-only fund, a female-only fund? Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interim answer, but I'm hoping and I'm wishing for a time when, and I know I'm talking myself out of a job here. I'm essentially talking myself out of a job, but no, but I think it would be great for the ecosystem if I didn't have to exist. I think if I didn't have to exist, then I think everyone, all of the funds that are out there will be doing what I think they should be doing. So I think it's an interim fix, but yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, this is only a short-term thing.
And just to follow up on that question, I'll get your thoughts on this, Remus, but how did you find pitching a black-only fund to LPs?
Yeah, it was...
Because is the conversation more about returns or impact?
So it's a really difficult question because you have to tailor your message to the LP that you're speaking to. And some LPs would treat Cornerstone regardless, even though we treat Cornerstone as a commercial fund, they will treat us as a social impact fund just because of the benefits, the potential benefits, financial inclusion benefits that could come or arise off the back of our existence. But we also think there's a massive opportunity, and the massive opportunity is that there are so many, I'm sure in this audience right now, there are so many talented, dedicated, brilliant founders that are in this community, but at the moment are just not being seen. And yeah, we want to be able to change that. And sorry, Philip, remind me of your question.
I just said, how was the conversation pitching?
Ah, yes, that's it. So the conversation, it definitely depended on the type of LP that we're speaking to, and we had to include both the social benefits as well as the commercial benefits. So social benefits, as I said, financial inclusion, financial inequities are addressed, and also the fact that the capital flows going into black and diverse founders is so low that the potential upside is obviously going to be far greater because I recognize and others should recognize that they are currently being mispriced because nobody is looking at them. So they in themselves are a commodity that should be worth something, but at the moment no one sees them. But we, I feel that we see them, and because we see them, I think the fact that because we can see them and the fact that there are social benefits, I think LPs have liked that story and understood that story and feel that it was a good investment. I mean, some of our LPs haven't got fund-of-fund programs. They were compelled to, back us because they felt that, our strategy was something that actually made sense.
Agree with everything. Look, I think we've arrived when 15% of GPs in the top tier VC firms are black. And we're miles away from that now, we all know. But ultimately, that's when the nature of investing, the nature of sourcing will change. We have to recognize that's going to take time. So in the interim, we need all of the above. We need the specialist funds. We need all of us as generalist funds to be doing everything that we can. We need to work together, which we do. For example, it could be that we're able to lead a round that Cornerstone may not be in a position quite to lead, but together we can do that. So I think it requires all of the above to get there.
Takes a village. So my final question, well, not my final question, it's my question. Can you give me an example of an LP who did ask about diversity and was, very adamant that they wanted to see that in the LPA, or, some kind of reporting around, we're going to give you this capital, but we would definitely want to see, black founders or diverse founders from local global?
Look, we had some great conversations. It's not that they're blind, and I think we had a really interesting session. So some of you may know every quarter we call Blackout Tuesday, where we dedicate all of our time, our energies to reflecting on what we're doing, and then in the afternoon we put events in. And we had in the first session we have each time is called Let's Talk About Race. So we have an amazing person called Jackie Onallo, you may know, who has been working with us for over 2 years internally to have all of the tough conversations that need to be had across all of these potentially challenging subjects. So it's been unbelievably helpful for us. And we had one of our biggest LPs, he flew in from Zurich. He was coming to talk to us about our fund, and it was just as we're starting Let's Talk About Race. And it was fascinating. So he was exposed to all of, I think the subject was white fragility. So this is an unbelievably successful, wealthy Swiss banker, lovely guy. And the conversation that it triggered, we said, look, you're welcome to join us, or you're welcome, to tuck in a room. And he's like, look, I'd love to join. But you could see there was fear on his face. Yeah, of course. Like just knowing that the issue's there, but being so far removed, but also at the same time, a very, very strong appetite to learn, to engage, to listen. And it was interesting afterwards, he's playing it back. I mean, he's part of a very successful fund himself. It was like the idea that we would ever have a conversation like this across a white male partnership. But I do think that there is a desire. I think the tools needed to get there are not kind of straightforward. But there's one which I hope they don't mind me calling them out, called M&G. I mean, the M&G, the big financial institution. So they have been very progressive. And if you understand why, everything has to be baked in economics. We're talking large pools of capital. But if you believe that economic growth over a 30-year time horizon, fixing systemic inequality is essential for the economy to prosper. And if you can anchor your thinking around that rather than impact or doing the right thing, this is real economics. And the one thing I would say as well, I think the advantage of this interim solution for guys like yourselves, and I've already seen these from some of the other black-focused funds that we're working closely with, you guys are going to be producing amazing returns. I've seen it. You can see this wave happening already. And that is the beauty of having a dedicated fund, because you can then say, look, there's a proven example here that focusing on black founders delivers outsized returns. So assuming you guys are going to be as successful as you can, I think that completely changes the conversation with LPs. This is not about doing the right thing or checking a box. We're outperforming other VCs in our class 3x. And that's also when you'll see capital flow change. And I do think the early signs are really promising there as well. And we could never do that as a generalist fund because we can't demonstrate that kind of data.
You actually jumped ahead to the next question in terms of what does the future look like. So, are we going in the right direction, do you believe? And what other interventions, whether it be government or other institutions, do you think will be helpful and help in order to push this agenda forward?
Yeah, this is a great question, a question I've been waiting for. I think what's required is a UK-based, whether it be the British Business Bank or another large government centralized organization that has a mandate, a large capital mandate to back, for the time being, emerging managers throughout the UK. I think there are definitely some programs that are out there. So there's the ECF program through the BBB. There are a number of other, as I've already mentioned, fund-to-fund programs, but they're primarily based in the US. If there were more that were here, more dedicated in the UK to solely focus on backing diverse managers, I think that could definitely create some real sustainable change for the short term until we get to that place where, everything catches up and Cornerstone VC is not required anymore. I think that's definitely something that I would suggest and something I'm definitely going to be fighting for along this journey that I'm on.
Remus?
I guess two thoughts. One, I don't think any government initiative is likely to do much in the nicest way. I think the answer lies with people like me, white male investors in the most successful funds. We are the majority. The actions that we take are likely to have a very substantial impact. So I think there's a huge responsibility on every white GP, in every male white GP in every top tier fund. I think that's one. The second, we spoke about this briefly before. Obviously we see many founders every week. We're very privileged to have incredible deal flow and lots of founders are keen to talk. If I could wave a magic wand, adjusting that 2 to 3% issue is if there was more black engineering and product talent who had spent 2 years at Google, Amazon, Meta, or had been part of these successful, high-profile, early-stage ventures, even as early team members. It's that inside track that's missing. All the talent is there. I just wish I could move more of the black talent into those roles, because they are, in that role, you get to see what it takes to build these multi-billion-dollar companies. And it's very hard from the outside. You can read all of the Medium posts and articles, but unless you're on the inside and you've built the products that catch fire and create this insane success. So if we could, and it's our responsibility to steer more and more of our founders to make sure they're hiring that talent pool, they will be the founders that will build the generation of companies. So
that's interesting. So from a talent and pipeline perspective, you think that plays a huge role in the quality of companies that we see from black founders as well?
100%.
Right.
I see unbelievable black entrepreneurial talent every week. Unfortunately, many are building businesses in areas which don't create the kind of returns that infrastructure technology creates. So there's amazing founders
like consumer,
building consumer, retail. They're awesome.
Hair and beauty. Sorry, anybody who's doing hair and beauty.
Look, they're incredible founders, but it's like if you were building in this area rather than this area, there's the potential for 100 times bigger company, but because you haven't had experience in that space, it's very hard to say, okay, I'm going to forget what I've learned or know, and I'm just going to suddenly build, a Plaid in financial infrastructure, $30 billion company. It's like, you've got to have been part of it to have seen that. But that's all that's missing.
Sorry, Philip, can I just jump on this? Because this is a fantastic point, and I'm glad it came from Remus first, and then I can jump on top. We need to get to a stage where more people that look like you and I are building, or very intentional about building, global scale businesses and move away from addressing a very small niche community. I mean, don't get me wrong, my father, my mother, they had their hands in hair and beauty companies. My father used to, or he still currently owns a number of barbershops in southwest London. But what he did that was slightly different, he said, actually, hold on a second. This shop is based in Tooting. The demographic of people in Tooting are primarily South Asian and Eastern European. But I created a barbershop that was only catered to a very small demographic of black individuals in that community. So he completely changed his business and said, I'm going to hire other barbers, technicians that look like the community that we're currently in, and create a more scalable, bigger business by addressing more clients, addressing a bigger, larger community. That's just how we have to look at business now. Let's stop thinking about business so in such a silo. I think if we can start thinking about businesses where, you know, your aspirations are global, you want to attract and sell a service, a product to those that are based in the US as well as those that are based here, and products that are universal, services that are universal for everyone. It doesn't matter whether they are black, white, brown, green. I think it's definitely an educational piece, and again, that's something that I think potentially Cornerstone and other diverse managers can do to help. But I completely agree with Remus. I think it's something that we need to work on collectively.
All right, awesome. Guys, thank you so much. This was a great panel. I've been told it's time, but do we have time for audience questions? Oh, sorry. One. We have one there, please.
I'd like to thank you all guys for sharing. I think we're missing the point here. The question is not about diversity, it's about equality. Okay, the problem is until we have equal. So my name's Sean. I'm a founder. I'm a gaffer, C-suite for Big Win Venture Tech. Okay, I'm a West Indian. I'm a brethren. Right. Thank you for sharing. The problem is not about diversity. It's about getting. Until we have equal access to opportunities, we're never going to get. There's no legislation in place for diversity, but there's legislation for equality. That's my first point. Second point, our leaders in our community, and you need to hear this, Remus, our leaders in our community are lazy and incompetent. I'll go so far to say as whatless. If you take this event, the Black Tech event, it's always in London. If you look at the agenda, there is nothing about equality. Any of the debates around here, there's nothing about equality, and that's the only legislation that enables black people at the moment to get into the workplace, whether it's LPs, GPs, VCs, food production operatives. And we know that these other companies are down here talking about diversity because there's no...
Sorry, so we're going to actually have to wrap up now.
Yeah,
the time is overlaying.
There's no legislation in place for them to be accountable. So, of course, they're going to talk about diversity. They're not going to talk about equality, are they? So,
Okay, I want to catch up with you afterwards. Let's have a chat, definitely.
Yeah, good point. All right, thanks, guys.
Sorry to cut him off. Thank you, guys.